Britain's rainforests are coming back. It might actually seem odd to even consider that Britain has rainforests, but it does. We are a rainforest nation, and I guess it kind of makes sense when you consider how much rain that we get. And unlike warmer tropical rainforests, these enchanting woodlands are much cooler and deciduous. The plants transform with the seasons. But like tropical rainforests, they are still incredibly wet, and it creates these conditions for these amazing life forms to flourish. Right now, I'm actually here in Dartmoor, which is home to a few fragments of upland oak rainforest. These remaining fragments give us an idea of what we've lost in Britain, but I also think they show us what could still come back. It really is these upland environments where we can actually see this habitat come back, and it has been, but we'll get into more on that in just a minute. And in order to try and understand exactly how we can return this habitat, we'll be visiting another very special rainforest further west in the UK, a place known as Cabilla, which is home to a 3,000-year-old rainforest upon the rolling hills of Cornwall's Bodmin Moor, where Merlin will be giving us a tour, and he'll explain the significance of this special habitat, how they're working to reconnect people, create a new model for other farms to follow, and crucially, how they're embarking to restore this habitat. So I actually think that you don't have to work too hard in order to convince people that temperate rainforest is something to care about. All you have to do is show it to them. Temperate rainforests, especially these upland oak forests, they are just amazing. The way the branches twist and bend, and they're just covered in mosses, lichens and ferns. I love filming it because you have to do a pretty bad job in order to make it not look epic. And Guy Shrubs, the author of Britain's Lost Rainforest, I think he sums it up really well when he says that these little life forms which cling to the branches in these forests, these are our charismatic species. These are the species which we need to cherish and we need to celebrate, much like the lions of Africa or tigers in India. In Britain, I think we don't look inwards enough and consider the beauty of our habitats. And what makes these habitats even more notable is how few of them actually remain in the landscape. I think until pretty recently, these habitats have gone underrepresented. Despite their beauty and how amazing they are, they've kind of gone a little bit under the radar. Scattered, isolated patches of this habitat make up 1% of the country, but there's actually around 20% that is suitable for this habitat to thrive. And this weather pattern can be found along the western side of Britain, the Atlantic coast of the UK. That's why we sometimes call temperate rainforest Atlantic forest. This zone runs from Scotland down through northern England, Wales and into Cornwall and Devon. And this I think is actually incredibly exciting. To imagine that 1/5 of the entire landmass of the UK could be temperate rainforest. Could you imagine that? So before we can understand how to bring back Britain's lost rainforests, we need to kind of take a look at why they went in the first place. And the short answer is that we cut them down. So it's actually been a hack job which has taken place over thousands of years. We cleared forests like this for agriculture. A very similar story that's now unfolding in the tropics, in the Amazon, in the tropical rainforests. Their pristine rainforest is being cleared for monoculture crops and to raise cattle. And as recently as the 20th century in Britain, we've cleared our temperate rainforests for non-native conifer plantations. In Scotland, I visited this wonderful old oak tree, just completely covered in a mass of lichens and mosses, but it's just entirely surrounded by non-native conifers. And with all of this land use change came the introduction of the sheep to Britain. Now the sheep is a non-native herbivore. It's got no place in our landscapes, and they will readily munch up young tree saplings. And along with other imbalances to our native herbivores such as red and roe deer, and actually all of the other non-native deers that we have and grey squirrels, it's made our woodlands, it's made our landscapes essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet. And it means that forests like this, they cannot regenerate. They come up and they come down, but the key thing is there's always this new regeneration coming through. When you look over Dartmoor or parts of Scotland and really anywhere in the UK, it's a pretty common sight to see absolutely no trees. It's something which seems normal to me, but also completely abnormal. It's a hard thing to pin down. But sadly, this is our baseline for how we accept the British landscape. This is our idea of wild, our idea of natural. And actually, here at Wistman's Wood, ecologists have observed that it's expanding. Not only are the trees getting bigger, but we're seeing more of them. Using boulders as fixed reference points, we're able to observe how this forest is expanding. And this is likely due to climate change and also less browsing from sheep. But today, Wistman's Wood is facing different challenges. It's arguably one of Britain's most famous temperate rainforests. It's really got quite hot in the media, and I'm responsible for this. I make videos about this. So All I ask is that when you come to woodlands like this, habitats like this, is that you just treat them with respect. But I actually think that providing safe experiences of these habitats is key to their restoration, because if we allow people to experience them, people can connect with them. We can connect with them, and what better way to connect with them than through our feet? So going barefoot not only brings us closer to nature, and we know that there's a lot of science and understanding on how that can benefit us, it actually feels really good. But you know what? It's not always practical. It's not always, easy to do this. And that's why recently I've been wearing a pair of Vivo barefoots. I've begun the journey of rewilding my feet. Whether if we're walking, running, jumping, or dancing, I didn't realise just how good it feels to wear barefoot shoes. These boots I'm actually wearing now are designed for the forest ecosystem in mind. It's part of a whole collection where they've created footwear for different biomes. And the upper is made of this beautiful soft wild leather, and the sole is made of this Michelin plate, which is like thin enough so you can still feel the world around you, but you have the confidence to know that nothing is going to come through. And Vivo and Leave Curious align so well because we're both trying to do the same thing, connect people with nature, except they're going down the route of doing it through our feet. And this is a brilliant segue to introduce Merlin over at Cabilla, who also had a pair of Vivos on. He had the same ones on. We also had similar shirts on, none of this was planned. I guess we just have a similar style.
Come pig. Right, let's just feed you, because you are, look at this. You're chucking up the soil already. Let's feed you here. Pig. There we go. The personal story that Lizzie and I both had that really led us to this point was I was in the military for about a decade and did 3 tours in Afghanistan. And in 2017, I started to suffer quite badly with PTSD. And at a similar time, my wife and I were trying to start a family, and she was having a number of miscarriages and finding that very damaging to her mental health. And we both went through traditional clinical healing processes, but we also found a lot of healing in this valley, the place where I'd grown up, without realizing how special it was. And after going through that process, firstly, we wanted to create a business that would allow more people and bring more people into this space. But we also wanted to see if we could find a model where, rather than shrinking the woodland and increasing the grassland, this green tarmac, we could increase the woodland and perhaps find a way that we could still make a living from this, the traditional farming land, but in a way that restored the woodland. So we then started to study the woodland, and initially we had the Doomsday records that showed that it's 1,000 years old. So we know from 1086 that this woodland was extant even then, and 98% of our ancient woodland in the UK has been cut down, so that already puts it in a very rare category. We then did some peat core surveys with the Eden Project, and they were able to establish that this forest is, they were very specific. They said we can tell that it's at least 3,664 years old, give or take 29 years, which I love. So we know we've got at least 3.5, probably more, 1,000 years of unending growth, death, decay, regrowth, restoration happening within this valley. And it was at about that time, 4 or 5 years ago, that people started talking about Atlantic temperate rainforest as a habitat. And we realized that what we have here is a very rare and quite, there's nothing pristine in the UK, but as pristine as you can get example of rainforest in this valley. And at that point, it became crazy to even consider reducing the woodland to expand the farmland. It was about integrating the two together. Our initial project was a 1,000-year project. The charity that Lizzie and I founded, which is a national charity, the only charity in the UK dedicated to the restoration of Atlantic temperate rainforests. That charity is trying to help people to think more like these guys and less like ourselves. So humans are stuck in this 2, 5, 10-year time frame. Anything beyond 10 years and it becomes slightly irrelevant, whereas an oak tree can live for 1,000 years. These are millennial creatures they take 300 years to grow, they can live for 400 years, they take 300 years to die and rot back down into the soil. And if we can start to force ourselves to think a little bit more like an oak tree and to take a step back from our human perspective, then nature restoration, habitat restoration, and climate change, none of it, to me, seems that scary anymore. Okay. It might be scary in the short term, but we need to think for future, for the long term. We're doing more and more samples within the soil of the rainforest, and the organic matter, the mycelial content that we find within these soils is just off the chart. So whereas and this is, again, it comes down to those human short time frames. We classify anything as ancient woodland in the UK, which has been around since 1600. Now, to an oak tree, a 400-year-old woodland is still very young, it's a toddler. It needs to be thousands, several of thousands of years old to really have that full integration and equilibrium that the trophic system can create over given time and deep time. And here, the mycelial connections are so dense between each tree that each tree and each plant isn't just connected once or twice over. There's thousands of connections between root to mycelium to root, burrowed in at the cellular level, enabling the passage of not just water and sugar between every organism, but also electrical signals, warning signals, memories, knowledge, which means that whereas in a younger woodland that might be 200 or 300 years old, that we as humans might think, well, that's still quite old, it's 100,000 trees growing out of a big patch of mud. In an ancient rainforest like this, it's 100,000 fingers all sticking up from one giant mushroom that we're walking over. And that's the amazing thing. And it then manifests in so many ways. So we see, for example, the way that the masting happens of the oak trees here. So when the oak trees mast, when they create acorns in a younger forest, because they don't create acorns every year, they do it every 3 to 5 years. So in younger woodland, where there might not be such a connection between the trees, one tree might do it one year, one will do it another year, one will do it the year after. They'll spread it out throughout the season. You'll have this constant peppering of acorns. In a forest like this, with 4,000 years of connection between the trees, even though each tree is only a couple of hundred years old, between 200 and 400 years old, they've still got that connection beneath the soil. And that means that when they mast, every tree masts together. So every 4 years, we have a 1 week period where every tree in this forest, it's like they're whispering to each other and they've said, ready, steady, go. And they drop 1 million acorns at once. It's like walking over thick bubble wrap, it crunches. And then the year later, we have the saplings coming through. The tragedy we then have, so here's a good example. We had a mast about 18 months ago, and we've now got tens of thousands of little tiny oak saplings like this. And I always think it's amazing to consider that this sapling could still potentially be a living tree in the year 3024. But every sapling we have here will be eaten and will die, which is, I think, the tragedy we have within these forests, that, again, human short time frames, we see a forest and we think it looks very healthy, but over the space of several centuries, this habitat is suffocating. Every sapling in here will be eaten in the next 6 months by a rabbit, a grey squirrel, or a deer. And that's where, and when it comes to rewilding as a conversation, I think that the most important thing the rewilding movement needs to continue pushing on is reminding humans that we're a part of this system, not apart from it, and that rewilding is not about taking a beautiful area of nature, removing humans, fencing it off and letting it recover, because that often won't happen. We are in an island habitat. We have brought in so many non-natives. These woods are constantly being encroached in by beech trees, a non-native allelopathic tree that will take over from the oaks. And when that happens, the biodiversity plummets, the mycelial content of the soil plummets, the carbon sequestering impacts plummet. These systems will restore when humans help to undo centuries of malpractice, which means that when it comes to rewilding or nature restoration, we sit at the heart of it. And without humans, it doesn't work. If we left this forest for a century and went, well, let's just step back and let it recover on its own, every oak that falls will be replaced by a beech. Whilst an oak can hold 600 species, a beech might hold 30 or 40. You know, it would just go off a cliff. It's 8% of the potential. And the deer, so we have, as I'm sure I know you've done videos about this, we have 6 deer species in the UK. 4 of them are exotic. We brought them in from overseas, the fallow, sika, muntjac and Chinese water deer. They have no place within our ecosystems. The 2 we have, red and roe deer, we have both of them in this forest here. And roe deer are perfectly natural. They've evolved within these systems. But whereas the UK's carrying capacity, or the mainland, is 350,000 roe deer, that's the Forestry Commission's stats, they currently think there might be as many as 1.4 wandering through our forests. And to a roe deer, an oak sapling like that, is like a Ferrero Rocher just lying on the floor, and they come through and they hoover them up. And until we start having serious conversations about the return of other apex predators and reclaiming our position as humans as an apex predator and an ecosystem engineer and a hyper keystone species, these forests will continue to slowly, over the space of centuries, decline.
The 1,000 Year Trust is only just getting started, embarking on a journey to restore temperate rainforest, not just at Cabilla and Cornwall, but with an eye to the rest of Britain. With the idea that people are at the heart of this movement, I wanted to know how the Trust is beginning to get to grips with this opportunity.
We took the view that, we're a research-led charity. We want to be data-driven. That's how we want to do our stuff. And so we had to do a bit of a fundamental think around, well, what are our core strategic questions? And then what are our approaches to kind of asking those and hopefully getting some progressively interesting answers as well, because we don't know an awful lot about this ecosystem, and whilst we want to jump in and get involved and make changes because pace is a relevant factor, we're very, very cautious about doing a step forward and four back.
Ultimately, the goal is to re-establish 100,000 trees on the area to restore it. And that doesn't mean we are going to plant 100,000 trees. So quite a lot of this will hopefully be naturally regenerating. But at the moment, because we don't have any fences or anything to keep the deer out, it would probably take more than 1,000 years for those to actually naturally regenerate. And I mean, it's always, there are so many different layers to this question between tree planting versus natural regeneration. But I think for me personally, I also think there is something kind of social and personal where a lot of people feel really overwhelmed with climate change, and you think you can't really
Do anything.
do anything. It's so much bigger than you. And then if you can bring in volunteers and you can actually plant the trees, so you also feel you are part of this journey.
If we're really going to have a bit of a restoration attempt at this, it has to come from a community perspective. It has to be a change in how we see these landscapes. And whether we're successful with this planting or not, it's critical that everyone's involved and at least feels to some degree like accountable. Do they identify with what we're doing here? And if they do, or at least if more people are engaged than less, then I think that's a really positive step, almost kind of regardless of the impact. Because if we fail, we fail together, and if we win together, which just breeds a better ideations for round two. I think one of our fears is that people see us as the group that wants to own everything and do everything. Like we have no intention of doing that. I think the only intention that we have is saying, here's a space where we're trying to show how you can do it, and it might look differently for you, because all the landscapes are different. Like temperate rainforest in Scotland, where there is the most of it, looks very different to Cornish temperate rainforest. So there'll be variation. But for us, I think what we're trying to say is holistically, we're trying to catalyze a movement. Rob, that's really where we're at here, and it's not everywhere. So we even had researchers come here before and say, well, it's not relevant for every landscape, and what are you going to do? You're going to put temperate rainforest in East Anglia in the flat lands? Like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, not at all. Like, that would be a really big problem, I think. But one thing we are going to do is definitely target upland areas in the natural kind of catchment zone for where this ecosystem could be thriving.
Both Enya and Harrison have a background in studying tropical rainforest, and they're looking to draw from these experiences and knowledge and integrate them with this project.
Lots of the research done on tropical rainforests are done by Western universities and research groups. And they'll go there and often have a local guide or a local assistant. And the questions might not always be formed in collaboration with local communities. Sometimes they are, and it's fantastic, but it's not always the case. And historically, I guess less so. And we've learned so much about tropical rainforest in an inefficient manner. But now is a brilliant time for them to come and teach us about how to do this work. It's a wonderful time where we get to go to these communities who we've been, looking at from different perspectives and saying, hey, you guys are you're leading this, and I'm going to empower your knowledge. And let's see if some of these lessons can be transported back to us, because it's a two-way street. It's not one way. And, we're desperate to kind of foster that here. And we think that's really, really innovative in terms of the flow of data, but also the flow of innovation and leadership too.
If we're really to see temperate rainforests return, we need to engage and bring together landowners, the people who live and work in these potential rainforest zones. They need to be incentivized. They need to be shown that temperate rainforest can be integrated with, or sometimes take the place of, whatever it is that they're doing with the land. And Cabilla and the 1000 Year Trust are en route, providing us with a blueprint to doing just that. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, then please subscribe to Leave Curious. It really helps the channel grow, and it enables me to keep making these videos. Also, do go and check out Cabilla and all the good work that they're doing over there with their trust. And you know what? You may as well begin your journey of rewilding your feet. Take advantage of the discount and the 100-day trial and see what Vivo can offer you. If you want to keep watching the channel, check out the video that's on the screen now. But in the meantime, thank you. Leave Curious.